The world keeps shouting, learn to code or be left behind. But what if that voice is wrong? What if the world doesn't need more coders at all, but something far rarer, far more dangerous, and far more human? Before you scroll away, stay with this story, because it might change how you see your career, your value, and your future. And if stories that challenge the biggest lies of our time matter to you, subscribe now, because what comes next isn't comfortable, but it is necessary. The first time Armin heard the sentence, it sounded like heresy. He was sitting in a cramped co-working space on the 6th floor of a concrete building that smelled of burnt coffee and ambition. Around him, screens glowed with lines of code, Python, JavaScript, frameworks he barely understood but pretended to. Everyone here spoke the same language: productivity, scalability, disruption. And yet, when the old man at the corner table leaned over and said quietly, "The world doesn't need more coders," Armin laughed, because laughing was easier than thinking. Armin had learned to code because the world told him to. Not one voice, but thousands. YouTube ads promised freedom. Influencers promised six-figure salaries. Universities promised relevance. Governments promised jobs. Even his parents, who barely understood what coding was, repeated the mantra as if it were a prayer. "Learn programming," his father said. "This is the future." So Armin obeyed, because obedience disguised itself as ambition. For years, he chased syntax like salvation. He memorized commands, frameworks, shortcuts. He stayed up late debugging problems he didn't care about for products he didn't believe in. Each solved error gave him a brief hit of satisfaction, like scratching an itch that always came back. Around him, thousands of others did the same. They called themselves builders, but most days they were just maintaining systems designed by someone else, optimizing clicks, shaving milliseconds off load times that no human would ever notice. The co-working space was full of people like him, young, driven, anxious. They wore headphones like armor, drank caffeine like fuel, and spoke in buzzwords to hide their fear. Fear of being replaced. Fear of falling behind. Fear that all this effort might still not be enough. Because deep down, everyone knew the truth they never said aloud: there were more coders than meaningful problems willing to pay them. The old man's name was Ibrahim. Nobody knew exactly what he did there. He didn't seem to code much. He spent most of his time writing in notebooks, reading physical books, and staring out the window as if the city below were a puzzle he was slowly solving. People assumed he was retired, or rich, or irrelevant. In a space obsessed with speed, Ibrahim moved slowly, and that alone made him suspicious. "You don't believe me," Ibrahim said, smiling as Armin laughed. "That's good. Belief without resistance is just laziness." Armin shrugged. "With respect, sir, everything runs on code now. Apps, banks, hospitals, governments. How can you say the world doesn't need more coders?" Ibrahim closed his notebook. "Because need is not the same as dependence. Addicts depend on drugs. That doesn't mean they need more dealers." The sentence landed harder than Armin expected. He wanted to argue, but something stopped him. Maybe curiosity, maybe discomfort. Ibrahim gestured for him to sit, and against his better judgment, Armin did. "Let me ask you something," Ibrahim said. "Why did you learn to code?" Armin opened his mouth, then paused. He gave the usual answer at first: career, money, opportunity. Ibrahim nodded patiently, like someone listening to a child recite a rehearsed line. "And before that?" Ibrahim asked. "Before the money." Armin thought back. He remembered being younger, sketching stories, imagining worlds, asking questions that annoyed teachers. He remembered wanting to understand people, not machines. But those memories felt irrelevant now, like childhood toys boxed away. "I guess, the future," Armin said finally. Ibrahim smiled sadly. "That's what they all say." Over the next weeks, Armin found himself drawn back to Ibrahim. Their conversations became a strange ritual. In between sprints and stand-ups, Armin would sit with him and listen. Ibrahim didn't rant. He didn't hate technology. He didn't dismiss code as useless. Instead, he spoke of imbalance. "The world doesn't suffer from a lack of code," Ibrahim said one afternoon. "It suffers from a lack of judgment. From a lack of wisdom. From a lack of people who can decide why something should exist before asking how to build it." Armin frowned. "But coders build solutions." "Solutions to what?" Ibrahim replied. "And decided by whom?" That question haunted Armin. He began noticing things he had ignored before. Apps designed to addict, not help. Platforms that claimed to connect but quietly divided. Systems that optimized profit while eroding trust. He realized that most coders he knew weren't solving problems, they were implementing decisions made by people far removed from the consequences. The more Armin paid attention, the more cracks he saw. Brilliant engineers working on meaningless features. Entire teams rebuilding the same products in different colors. Startups pivoting endlessly, not because they'd learned something, but because investors demanded growth narratives. Code multiplied, but clarity did not. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Armin asked Ibrahim the question that had been forming in his mind. If the world doesn't need more coders, what does it need? Ibrahim didn't answer immediately. He looked around the room, at the glowing screens, the hunched shoulders, the restless tapping. It needs fewer people who ask, can we build this? And more people who ask, should we? That night, Armin couldn't sleep. He thought about the algorithms shaping elections, the recommendation systems shaping beliefs, the automation replacing jobs without replacing dignity. All built by coders, all technically impressive, all morally ambiguous. He realized that code was power, and power without wisdom was dangerous. Months passed. Armin kept coding, but something inside him had shifted. He started asking uncomfortable questions in meetings. Why were they collecting this data? Who would be harmed if it leaked? What behaviors were they encouraging? His colleagues grew impatient. That's not our concern, they said. We just build. Eventually, Armin was asked to stop asking those questions. He quit shortly after. Without the structure of his job, Armin felt lost. The world that had promised certainty now offered silence. Friends told him he was foolish. You had a good role, they said. Why throw it away? He didn't have a clear answer, only a growing sense that he couldn't unsee what he'd seen. He met Ibrahim one last time before the old man stopped coming to the co-working space. I